Welcome to the Long Take Review, a film podcast with one eye always on the Oscar race. I'm your host, Jen Sobchak-Bankard, and I'm here with someone who loves podcasters so much it's hard for him to be alone. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
The other night I tripped a nice continental drift divide mountain Sid in a line, Leonard Bernstein. Hi, Jen.
Really?
Be here. I have been practicing that for 3 days.
I genuinely did not think that was what you were going to pick, and that's amazing. So those were references to the film we are here to review today, Bradley Cooper's Maestro. The film tells the multi-decade story of the marriage between actress Felicia Montealegre, played by Carrie Mulligan, and composer-conductor Leonard Bernstein, played by Bradley Cooper. The big, sweeping, romantic biopic has been nominated for 7 Oscars. It had a pretty good haul on nomination morning. Yeah, Best Picture, Best Actress, Best Actor, Original Screenplay, I'm side-eyeing that one, Makeup and Hairstyling, Cinematography, and Sound. And so, of course, the film is available to stream on Netflix. It has been for quite some time. If you are listening to us for the first time, we'll have a spoiler-free section designed for those who have not yet seen the film. And then, although if it's on Netflix, like, what is your excuse, I guess? But we will issue a very clear alert before we switch into spoiler mode for the rest of the show. Leonard Bernstein was considered one of the great American composers. Greg, if listeners think we're great American podcasters after listening to this episode, what can they do?
Jen, I am so glad you asked. Listeners, if you don't want to miss any new episodes when they drop, please follow the Long Take Review wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and more. That's right, YouTube and more, thanks to the efforts of the absent but not forgotten PT. We host the feed on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, and you can follow us on Instagram and Threads at The Long Take Review. Also, please follow our hosts on Letterboxd and tag your own movie reviews with LTR Pod to show us what you watch and what you think of it. We can't wait to see what you're up to, listeners.
Amazing. Yeah, and the YouTube thing, we only just learned about how to do that, how to get on there a few days ago. So it's hot off the presses, and it already doing really well. We've gotten a lot of views already on old episodes, so that's amazing. All right, we are just about ready to get into our discussion of Maestro, but first we have, we're getting in the home stretch, everybody. So we have a pretty big awards season update.
Just in off the wire, it's your Hollywood news.
All right, so we had a lot going on. SAG was on Saturday. PGA was on Sunday. Indie Spirit Awards also, I believe, was yesterday. I think I saw a post about that it was yesterday. And then I think there also was, like, whatever the Makeup Guild had their awards as well. So let's start with SAG, because I think that's probably the biggest one. Greg, what did you think overall of SAG? Was it what you expected? Were there surprises for you? What do you think?
Let's just bracket a little talk about the show. The show moved to Netflix, which gave it the opportunity to really shake things up and do things differently. And I would say for the most part, it did not. It seemed to be a pretty standard kind of award show structure. They didn't break too much. It was really nice to not have ads, which kept it pretty tight. I think it was supposed to be 2 hours, and they did go just over that. My personal reaction is I forget how few awards SAG has to give out. Like, they do combine TV and film, but it's like I'm sitting there, I'm like, how are we already at the best drama, the best comedy? And it's like, oh, because that's basically all there is, or the best ensembles for drama and best for comedy. So pretty fun night. Did you, I know you were watching live on your phone / the airplane Wi-Fi while traveling, but what did you think of the show?
I enjoyed it. Well, so it's weird because I watched it very piecemeal and with stops and starts. And so, like, I don't think I actually saw all of it, but I feel like I saw enough of it that I don't need to go back and watch it again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I feel like for me, what it really reminded me of was all the things that our Oscar podcasts and critics and pundits, the people, whenever they complain about award ceremonies, that they cut off the speeches, they don't show enough clips, they're not actually showing acting reels and stuff like that, and they're trying to cut corners, but they're cutting the wrong things and they're adding stupid bits. I feel like this was a good example of, because like you said, there were no ads, that everything just felt a lot like more relaxed in terms of, and
Mm.
they just gave more time to everything. Now I remember from our text thread that PT was sort of making fun of it towards the end, being like, why is this happening, what is what's going on? So maybe they might have gone a little too far in the other direction in terms of like making the show too long and too bloated. And I think I did see a couple articles of people sort of critiquing it for that reason. But Jeremy Allen White was giving his speech, and he was so used to rushing that he finally stopped and was
Mm.
like, wait a minute, I have more time. And you could definitely feel that in a lot of the speeches. Like, people weren't, once they figured that out, they were sort of like, they weren't like, okay, bye. Like it wasn't that kind of frantic energy after a certain point. So, and I just, I'm a sucker for the clips. I love the clips. So I'm like Sean Fantasy, where I'm like, just give me more clips. And so I thought that was really nice too. And that there was like more swearing. People just seemed a
Yeah.
lot, it was sort of actually felt like what the Golden Globes would want to be.
Yeah, and they should take some notes, definitely. I completely agree about the clips. I mean, we're here to celebrate movies. Let's actually see some movies. Let's really not just do a still photo and a kind of drive by, but really celebrate them and think about them. Um, I do think the pressure gets off the comedy bits a bit. So I did join late, so I missed the monologue myself. I only saw one of the comedy bits kind of full on, which was an actress who seems lovely from Abbott Elementary, and I just did not get the conceit of the bit. Like, it just didn't work for me.
Oh no.
But I agree. I agree with you though that I wasn't angry. Whereas in the Oscars, if I'm etching into hour 3 and we haven't even touched the big categories yet, and they throw something like that in, that's just like me being angry at some poor celebrity they roped in, or the host, or whoever's doing the bit. So I liked that. I think we're dwelling so much on that question because I would say the big takeaway from this award show is that it did not change anything. It felt to me like the tracks we've been on were just confirmed as the tracks. And there were people who I think could have really gotten a big boost out of SAG. You named 2 in the document, Paul Giamatti and Emma Stone in my book. And I think the fact that neither of those 2 got their big boost out of SAG, I think we're headed towards just the original expected winners in those races of Cillian Murphy and Lily Gladstone. I'm not mad about it, even if it's going to be kind of a boring Oscar night.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily either. Although from a prediction standpoint, it is getting a little bit more predictable now. I think I'd say that actress is still a little bit of a race, just because Emma Stone has won so much leading up to this point, and it was one of those things that if Lily Gladstone hadn't won this, then it would sort of be over. And now it's in the reverse for the best actor race, where it's like Paul Giamatti needed this, he didn't get it, and now Cillian Murphy is just cruising on into Oscars. So, anything can change. Obviously, there could be some sort of
Yeah.
upset, but I think oftentimes I was sort of predicting Lily Gladstone and Paul Giamatti, because I was like, well, if they're going to win, it would be here. And it seems like the SAG is a guild that would be, open to giving them a win. And so, like, just because of the types of performances and that they're really well loved. I've heard tons of talk that Lily Gladstone being very active during the strike helped her
Mm.
with SAG specifically. So that's an interesting question, because it's like, is that
Mm.
giving us a false sense of her competitiveness at Oscars? Like, is she like favored by SAG because of that? I guess I don't think so, because I think the performance speaks for itself. But yeah, so it's and especially with like, it was like not with the speeches, or because I love them both, but like it's like Davine Joy Randolph and Robert Downey Jr. It was like snooze fest. Like, okay, we thought this was going to happen. Oh, it happened. It's going to happen. Everything is inevitable. So like, yeah, not too much shakeup. Same thing with Oppenheimer for ensemble. I think I posted on Instagram. Zero pundits surprised by this. It's just like people are like, yep, I guess this is happening.
And I think only for shake up the race reasons, I was rooting for something else to steal it away, just so we could have 2 weeks of like, is it gonna win
Yeah.
Best Picture? And to me, this just locked it up. I think you're foolish not to predict it at this point. I always like that SAG gets a few nominees in that don't kind of fall into Oscars. I think this year Color Purple stands out, and it's not a perfect movie, but it's good, and the ensemble is good in it. So I like that they shed a little light on there. And for that reason, there was like this small part of me that thought maybe American Fiction or one of these other smaller nominees could steal Ensemble away. But you know, PT was crunching the numbers to us about where it looks strong for Oppenheimer, and it seems like this is less of a share the wealth year and more of a
Yeah.
let's just let this take everything. And you know, I'm glad Devine is there instead of Emily Blunt. Sorry, Emily Blunt. And I'm you know, glad that Paul Giamatti has been competitive, but it does just feel like we're headed towards Oppenheimer's night, which rolls right into the Producers Guild. Now, you have to remind me / our listeners, is this a really good predictor? I recall it being so. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes. People take PGA very seriously because I believe for the producers are the biggest group after the actors. And so it's, and the other thing too, is because they have 10 nominees, it sort of is just an easy mirror image to Best Picture. So it's like, usually that is a huge, and it's also so late. It's usually PGA happens during voting. So it's like people are like, oh, this is the kind of late breaking indicator of what's going to win for Best Picture. People were surprised by the nominations a little bit because PGA does skew more mainstream usually in its 10. That's usually what sets it apart from like the ones that are they're not overlapping with Best Picture at the Oscars usually is because it's like blockbusters and stuff. So I think people were scratching their heads that Anatomy of Fall and Zone of Interest both got in, and then it was the exact same for the Oscars nominations. And so people, I think because of that, people were primed for a potential up. Like we're like, what other surprises does PGA have in store? But no, it's confirming it's Oppenheimer all day, every day. And I don't know. It would be crazy at this point if it did not win, right? Like what even could, and that's the thing, is like, what is its challenger at this point is the big question.
Yeah, I mean, I think nothing is the answer to that. It is crazy to me. I went out and talked to some just family members, some friends, like real human beings, and it's shocking how
What?
the Barbie getting snubbed is still like incredible news outside of like
Yeah.
Oscar land. And like I respect it. I've said it before on the show. Like there are a lot of people who get to the movies once a year, and this year they saw Barbie and they really liked it and are shocked at how that's put together. So even though I'm not somebody who thinks there's a snub there, period, because I think Greta got nominated for what she should have, and Margot got nominated for what she should have, even though they were good in their other roles on this film. I do like think a lot about those people, and that's why they don't like the Oscars. And you know, I really chafe against highly predictable awards like this. I mean, the classic example for me personally is Renee Zellweger in Judy. I saw Judy and like, this is a bad movie. Like, sure, she channels Judy, I guess. I'm not old enough to know if it's accurate, but like, okay, but why was this like 6 months of absolutely she's got it, it's Judy all the way? And I think a lot of people are feeling that way this year about Oppenheimer, and it would just be nice
Mm-hmm.
to have them changing up on that. So that's why I don't know, can we rebrand our podcast as keeping one eye on the Indie Spirit Awards? Because I thought their winners were much more in
Yes.
line with our taste and where we landed on the letter awards, which if people are on this episode and want to hear our true thoughts on last year's movies, they should definitely check out the letters episode. But what were you excited about from the Indie Spirits?
So lots of love for Past Lives, which I think Past Lives walks away empty handed at this point, Oscar Sunday. So I was really happy. I'm like, well, at least it has this. So Celine Song got Best Director, Best Picture went to Past Lives. Again, Celine Song's not even nominated in Best Director. Past Lives seems to be kind of at the bottom of the pack, maybe ahead of Maestro. In the rankings in terms of people predicting them to win. So that was super exciting, and I think I saw lots of photos of Celine Song, and then I think Sandra Hüller. Oh, what did she win? She must have won Best Actress, right?
Yes, I believe so.
I saw a picture of her, and she said the caption was her saying, "I can no longer live without you, Justine Triet," and I was like, yes. More movies from them, please.
Yes.
So it was fun seeing everybody, all the favorites from our favorites, sort of like accepting awards. And I want to save the other ones for you because I know one of your favorites, what you've been rooting for, kind of cleaned up a little bit too.
Well, I'm going to grab that opportunity, but I got a sidebar. Have you been watching how Celine Song's next movie is coming together?
A little bit. I've been trying not to read too much about. You can tell me, obviously, but I'm trying to read not too much because I don't want to get too excited. Is the
Let's do
TLDR? I don't
pure
want to get too excited.
cast. Hot off of Madam Web, Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, the Mandalorian himself, and Chris Evans, Captain My Captain. So I think
Wow.
that's exciting to think about those three people in her hands. I think
Yes.
Madam Web and 50 Shades aside, I actually think Dakota Johnson is way better than people give her credit for. And
Agreed.
obviously have a lot of love. I love Chris Evans, honestly, the most in Knives Out, and I would love to see him get to play a little more against his Captain America type. But American Fiction scored really well, and it was really great to see because I do think, it seems to have gotten a little boost as it arrived on. Let's see, I think it's still not streaming; it's just on demand to purchase. I
Right.
know my household bought it because my wife really wanted to see it. If we're being completely honest, we watched half and then she needed to go to bed, and it's been like a week, and we haven't actually coordinated schedules to finish. But
Oh
I don't think
no.
it's a lack of will on her part. It's
Right.
just, what happens with kids and busy lives. But it was really great to return to that film, well, the first half of it, and just see that my appreciation for it hadn't dropped. So here in the indie spirits to see, let's see, Cord Jefferson, which I don't know, feels like something's happening there.
I
And
think so
then
too.
Jeffrey Wright, which feels like we found one place to give him the award. I don't think there's momentum there, but it's really great to see him there and winning because it's a really great part, and I just want everything in the world for Jeffrey Wright. So good night for that movie. It was really fun to see.
Yeah, and I think so. I think you're right that like Jeffrey Wright, it's sort of like, oh, at least he got something because his chances, like he was had an uphill battle, I think, from the beginning. Just with the how competitive that category is this year. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio didn't even make it in, right? Like, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, it really, I think that really says a lot. But you're right. I think it's not this alone, because in general, just to give some context to our listeners, the Indie Spirit Awards, despite their timing in the hot and heavy Oscars season, like people don't really count them as indicators because they kind of do their own thing. Like because it's in the name. They're the Indie Spirit Awards. They're much more likely to reward smaller films than the Oscar would, and so a lot of people don't sort of see them as bellwethers or prediction indicators at all. But I think this win, in coming after Cord Jefferson's surprise BAFTA win for screenplay,
Mm.
plus I'm trying to think. He got American Fiction got nominated for WGAs, which are not happening until after the Oscars, but the nominations sort of tell us something too. So yeah, I think definitely people went from not even talking about American Fiction in screenplay to now being like, oh, it's got this locked up, and that happened so
Mm.
fast.
Yeah, yeah,
But Barbie is the sort of mystery factor because
yeah.
Barbie's been competing in original in most other places, and now it's going head to head with American Fiction and adapted at the Oscars.
Yeah, I was just going to say, why I'm excited is this means even if it doesn't win, Cord Jefferson has his ticket punched for at least 2 or 3 more projects. And that to me is the best thing about nominations that don't turn into wins. And, I was listening to a podcast where they're talking about the Greta Gerwig not getting the director nomination. And it's like, she's got whatever she wants, right? You know what makes you feel better about that? $1 billion. And she made so much money in all these ways for studios that she's good and she's got her opportunities and she will get to be creative and do whatever she wants. And so I do think it's much more important to celebrate somebody like Cord Jefferson, where like it wasn't a guarantee, right? This was kind of his one shot, and it's done so well both in writing and directing that I think he's got, at least a couple more films in the Hollywood calculation to really show his stuff. And that's really exciting. And, I don't think Jeffrey Wright was suffering for work, but it is a good reminder when you see. I don't always understand this phrase. They call them journeyman actors, right? Coleman Domingo, the journeyman actor who finally, and it's like I think that you just mean somebody who's worked a long time in small
Right.
roles, and I do think Jeffrey Wright's going to come out of this and with something like an Indie Spirit Award as like remember he can be a leading man and he's got enough fans that can happen now.
Yeah.
I was just listening to a podcast with Sam Rockwell, and Sam Rockwell's like, "Yeah, people still aren't sure I can be a leading man," and I'm like, "That's crazy," but I exactly see that, right? Like in the Hollywood calculation, he's not Brad Pitt. He's distinctive, right? And he's kind of
Right. He's your
he's a little
supporting
too
character
quirky.
actor.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that's crazy, but I totally understand that in the business he would feel that way and is probably right. But also it made me want to watch all his movies because he's awesome.
I feel like I could be getting this wrong, but I watched all the Netflix red carpet coverage because I thought that the show started at that time, but then I logged in and was like, oh, it's red carpet for like an hour. And then watched it anyway because it was in the airport. And basically, I think one of the two hosts of the red carpet told Coleman Domingo that now he's a leading man, right? Or like there was commentary about
Mm,
like you've got leading man energy, and I'm pretty sure they said it to Coleman Domingo. But I feel like that actually could apply to most people in the Best Actor category this year. Cillian Murphy also
yeah.
considered supporting, and this was his first like leading. He's been in so many Nolan movies, but this is his first leading role in one, and it's obviously paid off. So yeah, that's really fun. Yeah, so good job, Indie Spirits. We love you. We support you. You overlapped a lot with the letters. The last news I want to throw in, because I wanted to mention this when you were talking about Barbie earlier and the
Mm.
Oscars and reasons people don't want to tune into the Oscars. But huge news today: Ryan Gosling
Oh,
going to
yes.
perform "I'm Just Ken" at the ceremony.
Yes.
I could not be
There it
more
is.
excited. So honestly, this is a huge win for the Oscars because just
Mm.
for the reason that you were saying, like people want to root for Barbie. That's the movie that they saw this year. That's the movie they got excited about. And the more that the more that the Oscars, and again, it might have this hypocrisy where it's like the show's all about Barbie, but Barbie goes home mostly empty-handed. That could be a problem. That's the next morning's problem, not the evening of. And so, I think I'm just excited because a lot more people I think are going to want to tune in. I know like the Oscars party I usually have at my house that's poorly attended, maybe better attended because people are like, oh, Ryan Gosling's going to be singing. Great, I'm at your house. What time? So yeah, so I think that I'm really surprised he said yes.
I have the guess that he said yes for one reason and one reason alone, and that is called The Fall Guy, right? He's got another movie and he needs
Oh,
people to follow him. And so he wants to stay in their minds. And that
smart.
falls into is that something that an actor should have to do at his level? No, but they do, right? They all have to. So, um, yeah, I thought that was really exciting news. I think I suspect it's also he knows this has reached a cultural level where he just
Yeah.
needs to celebrate it and lean in. And I think that's the right move. It does. You were talking about come to our award show and we'll give you nothing. Um, I think the other thing people forget is that's just comedy all the time, right? Like
Mhm.
when you like Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems, or when Will Ferrell does something serious, or fill in your comedian. There's always that like, well, we're gonna pretend you have a chance, but you don't really have a chance. But please still come do funny banter and do a bit with Kristen
Right.
Wiig as you present and make us our money and get the audience there. And so to anybody listening, I don't think there are, who are really stuck on the kind of Barbie dynamic, just think about it that way. They're not picking on Barbie. They're continuing a long-standing, we're not really into comedy, but we want to use comedy to our advantage. But to your main point, I'm here for it. I'll be cheering. I was just informed by my good friend that we have tickets to watch the Oscars in a movie theater, the Brattle Theater here in the Boston area. So I think that's going to bring the house down. Like people are going to be clapping and cheering, probably singing along, knowing the Brattle crowd.
Amazing. Yeah, on the one hand, I'm a little nervous, and again, I'm surprised he said yes because it is a pretty risky endeavor for a performer. Like, you know, I was even worried for like Lady Gaga, because like just doing that
Mm.
kind of live performance, and even like the best singers have had trouble just with the setup, like production wise, like, that's, it's hard to get, it's because it's live. So I think, I'm a little nervous. Quick, who's your top 3 other Kens that appear with him on the stage?
Simu Liu was going to be out of my mouth no matter what your question was, because he's my
Nice.
favorite. Other than that, let's just get like every Best Actor nominee up there pretending to be a Ken for a
Yes.
moment. Let's just lean in and have everybody do it. Um, that's it. That's my choice. Maybe John Cena, like throw him in the mermaid tail. I don't know. What do
Sure,
you?
sure. Maybe make it an MCU reunion. You have Mark Ruffalo and Robert Downey Jr. get up there with them or
I
something.
like it.
That would be fun. Or honestly, like, who I'm trying to think out of the nominees who has like a song and dance background. If you're going for a Fall Guy advertisement, get him up there with Emily Blunt, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Mary Poppins herself. So that would be
totally.
fun. But yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll turn that into a social media thing. We'll poll everybody to be like, who are your Kens? Who do you want to see up on that stage singing "I'm Just Ken"?
Michael Sarah, come on, we got to get Alan out
Oh,
there.
that's
Just
right.
throw him in the background, have him in the
He was.
costume.
You said you missed the beginning of SAG.
Mm.
I felt bad for him because he was the first. I'm an actor. They made him do a walk and talk,
Oh.
and he kept pausing at the wrong times, and I mean, in some
Oh.
ways it was perfect because it was a very like Michael Cera type energy of
Sure.
like, I'm not, I don't really know I'm just being really awkward about this, but I feel like it was for the wrong reasons. And so I was like, oh no, like, and then finally he was like, I'm Michael. He finally stopped and was able to land. I'm Michael Cera and I'm an actor. So like, at least there was that. But
Mm.
it was nice to see
All
him there.
right.
The Hannah Waddingham, because I know you're a big fan of hers, actually had the best I'm an actor
Mm.
story. So I would just go back and watch it just for that.
I don't think we shouted out. She killed it at the BAFTAs,
She
singing
did.
time after time. I'm like, why does anybody else get to sing during the people we've lost
Nope.
montage? She was
Yeah,
phenomenal.
just get her. Yeah, and her story was about like being starting out as an actor in the West End. So it's a
Nice.
really good anecdote. Very funny. She also killed it on the red carpet because I mean, obviously she looked amazing in general, like in the traditional sense, but her purse was like a little cardboard clutch that her daughter made, and it
Oh, that's
and it
awesome.
and it just said "Epic" on it in crayon, and then had a bunch of drawings on it. And she was just like, my stylist was kind of like, "Wait, what?" But she's like, "I love it." So yeah,
I'm doing
yeah,
it.
she went. She
Ah,
won.
the
She won.
best. The best.
Okay. I guess any last thing, maybe any favorite speeches from SAG? PGA wasn't televised.
um Yeah, honestly, none that really stood out. I think you said it. Like we've heard these people give speeches so often. I thought Davine was better at the BAFTAs, and RDJ, they're feeling very samey. He needs Brad Pitt's guy to come
Sure.
up with some
Yeah.
new bits a little bit,
He's
but
someone to
not
freshen it up.
bad. Just yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I feel like he's brought his I'm a Hollywood reject thing to its
Mm,
logical like it's kind of run out. I think the energy for that
yep.
has run out, and so we need to, but maybe my hope is that he's kind of holding on to the actual serious version of the speech. You know what I mean? Like that
Mm.
has more meat to it than just like I'm jokey. So hopefully we'll see that when he wins on Oscar Sunday. All right.
I'm expecting a real tribute to his dad, the actual speech, because if you
Oh, good
saw
call.
that documentary, was it called Just Senior? I want to say it
I think
was
so. That
some
sounds
one
right.
word title. But if people aren't familiar, it was last year. It was a documentary he made about his dad, who was also an actor, as his dad was kind of passing away. Really kind of raw compared to what we see of RDJ usually. It's still a little performative. It wasn't like
Hmm, hmm.
real, like behind the scenes, but I think it was clear that that was a vanity project in the good sense of let me make sure my dad knows he was appreciated. And I expect that to be the bulk of his speech. I'm calling it here
Aw,
now. Do I put
that's a
money
really
on
good call.
Gold Derby for that? I don't know. Vegas.
I don't think
Hello,
they have something
Vegas.
for that.
Here's my
Yes,
money.
you gotta parlay that with something else, yeah. Um, Lily Gladstone also, now that you're reminding me about the speeches, she had the cutest moment where she just came up on stage and patted the statuette on the head. It was
Yeah.
adorable. And her speech was, like, perfect. It was, like, yeah, exactly what it needed to be. So, yeah, hopefully that's gonna build momentum for her. into it. Not that
Nice.
I wouldn't be mad if Emma Stone won. I know you might be because you weren't a fan of Poor Things.
That's probably the one that I'm most nervous about the
Mm-hmm.
delta between who I really want to win and the chances they don't. It's
Yeah,
Lily Gladstone, but I think
for
we're
sure,
in good
for sure.
shape.
So yeah, that was a lot, and there's not much left. Voting ends Tuesday, and then USC Scripter is March 2nd, so that might give us more of a window into screenplay categories, and then that's it. Now I think we are ready to move on to Maestro, which has had kind of a quiet after its big nomination morning, has had kind of a quiet award season. We'll get to that at the end of the show. But Greg, what was your short take? What was your general reaction to Maestro? I think we have had a chance to talk tangentially about this film in other contexts on
Mm.
other episodes, and I feel like out of all four of us, you're the most positive on it. But yeah, what's your short take?
In as short a form as I can give it, why not? Right? Like, is it so uninspired that you shouldn't put it on for free because you already have your Netflix subscription? Absolutely not, right? So I mentioned this with some friends the other night, and they were like, I was gonna watch all the Best Picture nominees, and then I saw Maestro was on there, and I quit. And I was like,
What?
I don't know how it got that level of a reputation. So my why not is it is a perfectly fine film. It might be uninspired in some moments. It might not fully gel in a way that, some of these other Best Picture nominees do, but it is by no stretch of the imagination a bad movie. I think, well, I was about to do recommendation algorithm. So short take, why not? What else are you doing? Stop
Right.
scrolling on your phone. Just give Bradley Cooper one more view. He deserves
There
that
you
much.
go.
All he's done for you, all the raccoon voice he's done for you, I think he deserves one more. Jen, what's your short take?
So my short take is going to be hard to follow. All the raccoon voices he's done, that's hard to follow. But my short take is I'm with you that I feel like this movie is getting chewed up and spit out by the internet more than it should. And we'll
Mm.
get to that when we get to Rhetorical Situation, probably, in terms of the discourse surrounding the movie. And this happens with a movie every year where it's like people just get way too fired up on the internet and there's arguments back and forth. But my short take is like I wanted to like this a lot more than I did. I agree with you. I
Mm.
don't think it's bad. It's not like, it's fine. It's a very serviceable biopic, and there are certain things about it I loved. Like I loved the switch from black and white to color. I love actually really like the cinematography in this. The way that
Mm.
it sort of is trying to use the cinematic modes of sorry, your puppy's here. Hello.
My dog is making a cameo on the webcam. She just woke up.
Yay.
Sorry.
It's okay. Don't never apologize for pets. They are always welcome. This is a pro animal pod. Um, we love you, Messy. As an example. I really liked the way that it sort of captured the look and the feel of the movie, the style of filmmaking during the eras that we were in the story.
Mm.
Like that was probably my favorite part about it. But I just feel like the story itself doesn't quite hang together in a way that
Yeah.
is cogent enough for me to like get behind this movie. So I was really excited to look because I was like, everything about this, Bradley Cooper, check, love him. Carrie Mulligan, check, love her. Leonard Bernstein, big fan of his work, right? Love musicals, check. Like, black and white, yes, I love that. Old timey movie style is great. And so I was really excited going into it. And then by the end of it, I was just kind of like, maybe it's sort of like what you were. I was just like, huh, okay. Like,
All right. That's the thing I saw. Well, I'm going to keep this slightly vague, but my main thesis on this film is it is almost like it falls in the uncanny valley. Is this
mm,
a full biopic? It is not. Is it a biopic just of one moment of crisis, the kind of Ferrari, like one interesting day kind of thing? It's not quite that. And is this Bradley Cooper? It's kind of Bradley Cooper, right? It's like in all these ways, it just doesn't quite click. And I think because it's so close to all those recognizable things and yet is not those things, it just ultimately feels a little like, okay.
yeah, yeah.
And we can get into some specifics on that later.
We can. And I think my diagnosis of why it's kind of giving me that reaction, I love the uncanny valley diagnosis. I think that actually makes, I hadn't thought of that. That makes a lot of sense. For me, it's actually like, it's trying to have it both ways. It's both trying to be an
Mm.
unconventional biopic, but then seems to not be able to, it can't help itself in terms of falling into a lot of the tropes of a traditional biopic. And that sort of split focus, I think, is kind of at the root of most of the problems in terms of people's criticism of the movie. So we'll get into more of that in spoiler mode, I think. But yes, let's go to the recommendation algorithm in which we establish the audience of a film. So the segment acknowledges that not every film is for everyone. Other than people who have Netflix, which sounds like Greg, that's everyone Greg's recommending this to. Who do we think would like this film? Like who's going to be into this?
It's a really interesting question, and I'm gonna say my initial impulse is to say people who love Leonard Bernstein. Like, right? If this is a figure that looms large for you, I'm gonna be honest, he's not a figure that looms large to me. I think I'm a little too young to understand the presence he had in, they're called the children's concerts, right? Where he
Right, or the
literally
young
taught
people's,
people,
yeah, something like that.
young people's. And
Yeah.
so I was not of the right age to understand who he was during his lifetime, or was not tuned into that. And so my initial impulse is to like recommend it to, like, if you loved him, then yeah, understand this side. But then I actually think about my real life, and my mother-in-law loves classical music. She's a classically trained musician. She, went to a conservatory, all that. And loves Leonard Bernstein. And I when I saw this movie, I was like, oh, there's this incredible scene. This is not a spoiler because everybody's heard about it, where he composes the full something in a beautiful place that I don't know what place it is. And she was like, well, was it Blop and the Blop? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, so should I see this movie? And I was like, I don't know, right? Because I really don't know if you are of the age where that is the version of him. If he's a hero in your mind, I don't know that this film is actually going to be fun for you because of the way it complicates him. And there's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of kind of conservatism in that, right? Like small c conservatism that, you maybe don't want this version of him. But I would say that's another uncanny valley thing, right? Because it's not actually
Right.
like, let's make him an anti-hero and explore these nuances that made him problematic. It's still like, let's worship him for who he is.
Yeah.
And there's something real in that, but it's hard to make that come together into kind of a single person. So maybe people who love Leonard Bernstein, maybe people who really love Bradley Cooper. I do think you just said Bradley Cooper and Carrie Mulligan are both people who have a lot of fans, and I would absolutely watch this if I was a Carrie Mulligan fan.
Mm-hmm.
Her performance is weird, but it seems to be incredibly accurate. Like, I think she's
Mm-hmm.
really in control and uses her instrument well. So big fans of those actors, maybe fans of classical music. Anybody with Netflix, what are you doing? Watching, Love is a Battlefield where they shoot guns at each other and then go on a date? No, watch this instead.
Is that a real show?
I don't know. I'm pitching it out. Come
You
on,
just made that up.
Sarandis.
Okay. The fact that I couldn't tell is maybe a problem. So yeah, I am stuck on this question too, because I keep thinking back to, I think, The Big Picture. Amanda Dobbins told a story where, and I don't remember who the couple was in relationship to her, but maybe friends, maybe family, something like that. But they were people who were intimately familiar with Leonard Bernstein's story and were huge fans. They lived in New York. They were like, went to all the concerts, like they were as knowledgeable as any viewer of this movie could be. And they apparently left after like 20 minutes because they were like, well, we thought this was boring. This is all stuff that we knew, or something like that. Like,
Mm.
so that makes me scratch my head like, oh, maybe it's the uncanny valley thing where it's neither, there's no specific audience for it. It's not, it's like for not quite enough context for people who don't know Leonard Bernstein, and then too much, or too I don't know, too close up for people who do, or something like that. I don't know. It's weird. Because the other big thing, which, well, maybe we should keep this for spoiler mode. Never mind.
Well,
Um,
I think I know what you were about to say, and I will say I almost said something similar a minute ago. And part of the problem, maybe for you and I, is that we don't actually know how much of this was public knowledge before this, right? Like, there
True.
are aspects of his character that this could be like exposing for the first time, or these might be very well-known facts about them and their marriage and their domestic life. I really have no idea. So maybe those experts could tell us more if they were here.
Right. And like for me, like I mentioned, I'm a fan of his work. Like I took a musical theater class in high school and learned all about him and learned about how important a figure he was in American music specifically. And so I like know him from like a textbook standpoint, but I knew nothing about his personal life. And so like
Hmm.
for me, I was like, oh, like I was sort of interested to find that out after up to a point. So maybe you're right. Maybe his biography and sort of like his persona as a real person, not just a contributor to American music. Maybe that was widely known, or like we've been there, done that. So people were kind of out of it on that front. So yeah, but I genuinely don't know.
Well, and I just want to tack onto yours. Like, I mean, I was mainly like, I know him from West Side Story. I know him from that. And it's like, if that's the version of him you want, that stuff gets just totally bypassed here.
Yeah.
So there's not that kind of level of how did he actually do that thing I love, which
Right, it's not
is
a making of.
tricky.
It's
Yeah.
not Bohemian Rhapsody. It's not like
Yeah.
how did they come up with all these amazing songs and you watch them work their way through it in real time. It's more like that's very much in the background. And it's more
Yeah.
about his personal life. And so but also still about his fame and sort of like genius status and that
Celebrity
kind of
and
thing. So yeah,
yeah.
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 So it's about him as an artist, but not about his art, I guess maybe is the way I would put it.
Mm, yeah.
So which could be weird if you're expecting it to be the other way around. All right, so I think we bumped up against spoilers potentially a little bit. I think it's time to go into spoiler mode. If you have not seen Maestro, we've already said many times, Netflix isn't paying us, and we've said Netflix a million times. You can go watch it right now on Netflix. So I would suggest you go do that and then come back and return and rejoin us for the rest of the conversation. Okay. So, do you want to talk about this as a biopic or about the like criticism first? I guess maybe those are the two
So
choices.
just anticipating there's some people who maybe haven't actually watched it and are just saying like, I'm never going to do it, or I don't care about spoilers. Part of what we were dancing around is this certainly makes Bernstein's bisexuality and the fact that it was kind of an open marriage, essentially, that this was accepted by his wife, at least to a certain point, kind of becomes a pretty strong focus. And I was not expecting that because, again, I didn't know anything about him. And I really, that's what I was saying. Like, I don't actually know if it's well known that this is what their lifestyle was. I think it's really interesting to share that. And what stuck in my mind when I rewatched it is they have a big poster up in the scene where they're on the Ed Sullivan show in their living room for La Boheme. And I'm like, this is really what it is, right? Like they are living this beautiful New York bohemian utopic ideal of like, let's just love and let's just create art, right? I could sing Rent right now, but that's the wrong composer in the wrong musical theater. And so all of that kind of is like this great celebration. And yet it's like, what is the film saying about it? Like, in the end, it feels like they're just saying, hey, these people lived like this. And it's not passing judgment on that. It's not kind of looking at the complications of that, really. It's just kind of, here's some facts. And I think that's where, like, and so I'm basically telling you, I'll take it all at once. I think that's where a lot of the criticism comes from. And this is what your point was originally, that like, there's no there. And it's really weird to get so much really interesting material that just kind of circles around itself and is missing something.
Yeah, and I think I immediately go to the biggest, most climactic, dramatically at least, scene in the movie between the two of them, which is, and I didn't, I wanted to save my Snoopy in the vestibule joke for later, but I guess we're talking about the scene now. But the scene where they're arguing and then the Snoopy balloon for the Macy's Day Parade is going by, I think that seems to be the at least dramatic climax of the movie, right? There's the cathedral scene you could argue is like the like cinematic climax of the movie. um
Yeah.
But I think that one is like sort of like where everything kind of comes to a head with their relationship, and they're arguing, and like the claws are really coming out on both sides, right? And it's just like they're airing all their grievances out and stuff. And to me, the I genuinely could not tell if there was like a bait and switch happening where I expected that argument to be about their romantic relationship, right? And sort of
Mm.
his infidelity that she said she was okay with, but seems to not be okay with, or like there's something happening there, right? But then what she says in her big "I'm going to tell you off" moment is about his music, right? And it's
Mm.
like she's like you're being kind of pretentious, like you're not. She says something like, "You're not helping us celebrate the music. You're throwing it in our faces and showing how superior you are. There's hate. This is the hate in your heart thing. Like there's hate in your heart." And she's like, so it's almost like she just like their argument seems to imply that she doesn't actually care that much, at least at that point, about their marriage, and is more upset and mad at him about how he's not, I think they use the phrase like responsible for his gifts. I don't know if she says that, but like that's a theme running through the movie, is like how he has all these, he's blessed with all this talent, like how should he spend that talent, right? And I genuinely was like, oh, that's unexpected, that's not what I thought she was going to say. But then was like, but what does
Mm.
that mean? Like, what does that mean for the movie? Is that the movie trying to say something by bucking that expectation? What is that, what am I learning about their relationship? And I think this speaks to kind of the ambiguity of the film, as people are like, we don't really know what this movie is actually about. What is it trying to say? Maybe it's not passing judgment, like you said, which I think in general is a good thing, but even if it's not passing judgment on these people, it has to be like telling us something about them.
Yeah.
um
I mean, a simple thesis of like, this is the hard life of an artist, but it's worth it for great art is like the simplest, most cliche version of this. And it's still not even doing that. And
right.
I want to add another valence to what you were just talking about, which is also like there seems to be almost a plot about how they both were kind of prodigies in their field, him always to a greater extent, but she was, kind of bumped up quickly as an actress and then didn't get that fame. And it almost seems like
Hmm.
there's a tension there, but then they back off that. They later come back to, there's a scene, I believe it's while they are separated, of her doing like a super cheesy variety show. And it's like all her
Hmm.
dreams have shattered, but then she's still not saying that's what she's mad about. And that it's like it's there and it's not there. And I don't understand what to do with it.
Right. Yeah, and like so the film's arc is that she sort of quits on him, right? They get together, and she seems to want to take on this mantle of being his supporter, and like sort of like not in a muse sort of sense, but in like a I'm giving up my dream so I can help you with yours kind of thing. And then that falls apart, and then the big moment with the cathedral is that she returns at the end, right? But you're right, like I don't, like I could tell you that's what happened, but do I know why that happened necessarily? No. Like, and like how much of it is supposed to be, it's really about their marriage, and how much of it is really supposed to be about his art, or is the point that it's like both of those things are entangled with each other or something, like, but I don't know.
And then on what you just said, you add the opening scene and the final scene. So the opening scene is him seemingly having been asked in an interview to talk about her, and he is playing a kind of tinkly piano number to say that song's always on my mind and she's always on my mind. And then the
Mhm.
very last shot is the title reveal, which is a still on beautiful Carrie Mulligan, which almost seems to imply, even though the conjugation is wrong, that this film was actually about her, that the title referred to her, which the conjugation should be Maestra, right? But you
Mhm.
couldn't
Mhm.
really call the film that and do it. But it really felt like at the last moment they wanted to say she's the one who's been conducting this, right? She's been in
Right.
control and shaping it all. And that's just like totally mind warping too. It's like, wait, that's what this was or wasn't? And like it
Uh,
just doesn't ever kind of all connect in. Like that also would be very interesting to think about. He only had whatever he had because of her and it all, but I don't know, because when she dies, we get a specific scene showing essentially he's still got it. Like, he's still a great teacher, and now he
Right.
gets to live this
He's
free
still
life.
partying out there, having a great time. Yeah. So to give a little context, mostly for listeners, the way that this film was sort of pitched, and I think I want to say by Bradley Cooper himself, like in terms of interviews that sort of were coming out as the movie was about to come out, or an advertisement of the movie, it seemed like the mission, actually not dissimilar to Killers of the Flower Moon, was to take this what people would expect this movie to be and to pivot the focus so that it wasn't just about Leonard Bernstein, a great man, but that it was more about his wife, Felicia Montealegre, right, and the Carrie Mulligan character, or that it was more about a marriage and a relationship, and that like you were saying, like he wouldn't have been as great without her, right? And that really
Mm.
what, like, I think it was really trying to do something new and different by being like, well, it's not just about the famous person, it's about the people around them, right? It's about the people closest to them. And similar to Killers of the Flower Moon being like, it's not about the 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 white men. It's not about the FBI. We're going to recenter the focus on the Osage Nation and on Lily Gladstone's character of Molly, right? Or on I'm seeing more parallels now. Or on the marriage between Molly and Ernest, right? It's about their love and not necessarily about all, like, it's not only about this other stuff. So I on paper that sounds good to me, and it's just something about the execution that is not following through on that. And earlier I said I think it's because it's trying to have it both ways, because it's like, oh, we're going to try to make this unconventional biopic. We're going to make it about Felicia and not necessarily about Leonard, or Lenny, I guess I should say. And then it ends up being about how great is Lenny? Isn't Lenny great? Like,
Hmm.
so
Which,
yeah.
like, and this, we can psychoanalyze myself and Bradley Cooper probably, but there's like the overly charismatic person in your life is such a interesting storytelling piece. Like, I have in my family, my dad's side of the family, it's like all full of the guys who are like the center of the party, no matter what room they're in. And so, like, I have that in my life of this like great
Mm,
charisma and the weird pressure that puts on you, but also no pressure. And so, like, to see that interplay between them is really interesting, because, like, it is draining to be the person beside the person with all the charisma. And I think there's, something to that piece of it. And then the Bradley Cooper psychoanalysis, it's like, put this in conversation with A Star Is Born, and this seems to be like, I'm really interested in showing you how men are frauds because it's all the women, and yet he keeps trying so desperately hard to get us to pay attention to him in that context. It's really difficult to figure out what the
mm,
project of the two works, and it can be folly to try to read one message across two films, but they have such a weird relationship with fame, charisma, all these things. It's
right.
it's tricky.
Right. And both stories actually are sort of about the burden of artistic genius. Right. And like they're both about couples where one member of the couple skyrockets to fame and seems seemingly more talented than the other, right? And sort of it's sort of like the sacrifices they have to make to achieve some sort of sublime status in their art and as a performer.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and again, that if the movie just focused on that, that would be really interesting. But I think there was a lack of clarity where I was kind of like, oh, is it about this? Oh, is it about this? Like, and there were lots of things that kind of bounced around, which is, brings us back to what people usually complain about stereotypical biopics of, like, it's cradle to grave, it's covering their whole life. There's no other project than we're just telling everything that happened to this person, right? That's usually what people complain about biopics. This movie seems like it wants to have a more specific and focused point of view, but I couldn't tell you what exactly that was. I have like 3 or 4 ideas what it could be. Um, okay, that's making me feel better, because I was like, there's a lot of this that's just like blows you away in terms of, like, that cathedral scene is like cinema with a capital C, in my opinion, right? It's just like so well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's well performed, right? Because this is the moment that's like Bradley Cooper spent 6 years learning how to conduct for 6 minutes, right, or whatever it is. And you see it. It's like he's giving his whole body and soul over to this performance in that scene. And then it's also just the way it's shot too, is like, because it starts out like a wide shot of the orchestra, and then slowly kind of tracks, there's a tracking shot to get closer and closer in on him, right? And I'm just like, this is beautiful, this is great. But then like that's just one scene. How I fit that scene into the larger story, then I start to be like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, actually, so when I rewatched this yesterday, my wife was out and then came home immediately after that scene and watched, I forget what follows that. I think it's cancer stuff. And she's like,
Oh, right.
what are you watching? And I was like, if you had walked in 5 minutes ago,
Right.
you would have just been blown away. Like this
Right.
is
Right.
such an incredible scene. And she likes Bradley Cooper from Alias days. She'd been in like, Will Tippin, what are you doing, my boy? Like, you're great. And yet missing that, and I don't mean to make light of the cancer plot because it's incredibly acted, and I've had cancer in my family, and like it's one of the more realistic
Mm-hmm.
portrayals of suffering from cancer I've ever seen on film. But at the same time, it's like it just takes over the movie, and like I get it. That's what cancer does. That's what an illness does to a marriage, to a family. But in a film, you're like, what is it going to say? Or how is it going to change these characters? And it really just turns into their whole life turns into kind of cancer orbit, which is what happens. And then when we're in spoilers, when Felicia dies, it's like nothing happens because of that, right? Like
Hmm.
you put this elsewhere in the document. He tells us he's very sad. We don't actually see that. He just kind of bounces back and is like, yep, up to old tricks. I'm gonna mentor some youngins and go dancing in the club with them. And it's like, well, you can tell us that she was the maestra all you want, but it doesn't show us that. It's so it rings hollow in that theme as well.
Right. And like, if anything, the framing of people interviewing him after she's died and him sort of reflecting on her and her contribution to his career and stuff like that, right? Like, or just like the hole that is left, that seems to be left in his life because she's gone, right? He talks about how much he misses her and stuff. That has the potential to be sort of like he didn't realize how important she was, not just to him
Mm.
personally, but to his music until it was too late, kind of. Or something like that. You know what I mean? Like that would make a lot of that would make sense if the thesis of the movie were everybody took her for granted and every great man, every great artist, every genius has a Felicia that they would not be where they are without them, right? So like that made sense, but those scenes, those framing scenes where he's at the piano and getting interviewed and stuff like that at the beginning and the end, like doesn't quite get there. And which is so interesting because you mentioned that he tells everybody exactly how he feels. That's PT's big critique of this movie. I've heard him say is that the screenplay makes it so all the characters are just like it's just exposition of how they're thinking and feeling constantly, and nothing is sort of implied or shown, right? It's too much telling, not enough showing. But then if you think about the story as a whole, it's a lot of showing and not like I still don't know what we're being told, right? So like I think it's the
And
combination of those two things that makes it kind of weird.
I want to give a little credit to this idea of breaking the genre of the biopic because lives do not function on narrative. And the
Right.
problem with biopics is they force a life into a narrative. And so there's a part of me that finds it really an interesting project to be like, what if you just show life with its dead ends and its false starts and its triumphs off screen, apparently, like, hey, good job becoming the world's most famous composer, we'll maybe see that later. And it's like all of that like actually makes sense if you were portraying like verisimilitude of a life. But then within that structure, and this does look back to you quoting PT there, it's like, but then you don't have people acting in that movie, right? Nobody's in that movie. They're in a kind of broad stage performance of these are the feelings I have,
Mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm.
their big broad moments. And I think, it definitely is part of why I can't like full heartedly say this is a great movie, even though it really is shooting for that. And, I've said it on many podcasts in many contexts. We need movies that take big swings. And, sometimes you end up with Maestro, but I do respect the swing in it. I want to throw it to you with the question of I think we've handled some of the critiques. We've certainly aired our personal grievances, but just because this has become such a whipping post in Oscars discourse, talk me through like a couple of the things you really loved about this, and maybe I'll share one too after that.
Sure. So I actually don't mind the accents. A lot of people have critiqued them, but to me, as someone who grew up watching a lot of films from the 50s and 60s, and sort of that like Katharine Hepburn, like sort of like screwball comedy back and forth, I actually really liked a lot of the earlier scenes in the film, and like the the open like, and I remember when I saw this originally, because I had to, I think, watch it in 2 different sessions. And when I watched the first about 20 to 30 minutes, I remember texting both you and PT to say, wow, Maestro, I already know I'm going to love this movie, because it had so much verve and so much energy with like being with the way that it was shot, like the black and the black and, or what are they called? Blackout curtains, right? And then it's like that whole reenactment of the moment that Leonard Bernstein became famous, basically, right? Where he's getting the call that he's
his
being
literal
called
call to
conduct.
adventure. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. And there was, just the stylistically, I found that so appealing. And then just like, I'm not a huge fan of the screenplay overall, but a lot of those earlier scenes where Lenny and Felicia are courting each other and kind of getting to know each other, I really thought they nailed the sort of like the way that people talk in old movies from that era, in terms of the tone and the style, and like, and and I, say what you will about the Bradley Cooper's performance, and if he's trying too hard, we'll get to that later, I'm sure. But I really bought him kind of in this role. Like I was like the fact, like he seemed out of time to me. You know what I mean? Like there was a certain amount of time travel that I experienced when watching the first act of this movie that I really, really liked. And then the other thing is, I mean, just like the comedy of the Snoopy scene. I know we've already talked about the content of that scene, but like the big Snoopy balloon going by as they're in the height of their like worst argument ever. It's just so funny to me. I don't know if it's kind of in a different movie, but all the Snoopy stuff I was a huge fan of. Like to quote Io Adebari's Letterboxd review, this literally who abandoned Snoopy in the vestibule. Like literally, we want to know. You have a Snoopy.
It was me. I want to be very clear. I have the exact Snoopy in the movie, and this is my childhood Snoopy, and I recognized it literally as soon as it appeared. I was like, I have that Snoopy, and it's one of the things. Listeners, I just put a message in our chat that was, be right back, I'm listening, and I disappeared, and it was purely because I'd forgotten Snoopy for my visual gag, and I'd bring nothing to this podcast, this audio podcast, if not visual gags. So I ran upstairs to get my Snoopy. But
you abandoned Snoopy.
I did it on my bureau. But also, look, I'm a 40-year-old man who still has his childhood Snoopy. I deserve a little credit for that.
That's incredible.
But yeah, that scene is so good because it breaks the tension in that way. And that will be kind of one of the 5 things I remember most from this movie. Is it's like, it's such an intense argument. My wife and I always refer to Friday Night Lights is like the perfect married couple on screen, because they have these arguments where they're both 100% right, yet they fight about it. And that felt like one of those fights. It's so intense, and you're like, there's no winner here. And when Snoopy floats by the window, it just like explodes the scene in the like most delicious way. And again, maybe that's again a reminder of what life is like. Life is, intense and also absurd at the same moment. So definitely a real standout moment. I'm glad you highlighted that one.
It also kind of brings in like the weirdness of like, or I guess weirdness is the wrong word. It brings in the idea of the clash between their domestic life that they're trying to have with their family. Like, they have a pretty traditional wife and kid, like, it looks like a nuclear American family at that time, and yet it is far from that because of just the nature of that they're so famous, and they live that close to the root of the Macy's Day Parade, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
like in the high society of New York, and like, because there's something leading up to that moment where they're talking about like a random woman in the street. Did you catch this? When I rewatched it again, I still didn't understand what they were referring to. Like the kid, like there's some kerfuffle about like the kids are like, there was a woman outside, and like, but I don't know what it is.
There are, I mean, it all the things it's trying to be. It is trying to be a little bit of a New York movie and
Mhm.
fame in the context of New York. It felt like that moment was speaking to that, like an
Okay,
admirer or like a stalker or something. And this is
sure.
total wild speculation, and it didn't really make sense. And then I'm thinking the earlier moment where he kind of jauntily jumps out of his apartment and he runs into the couple and tells the baby like, I slept with both your parents, which is a great moment. And again, it's like let's just celebrate wild bohemian lifestyle. And like, yeah, they are such a part. And to me, nothing says this more than Carrie Mulligan's accent, which is that perfect kind of Hepburn East Coast
Yep.
waspy accent. And it just totally is like, yeah, they are a part of the elite of the elite. Like not just an apartment on the Central Park Macy's parade route, but like seemingly has a library in it. So I think they're
Hmm.
doing all right.
Yeah.
I'll throw it to one into the mix, and this is going to come across as an insult. As I started to rewatch this, I was like, "Oh my god, Maya Hawke is in this." I completely forgot she was in this, and yet, to your point about this kind of family life, the little moments Maya Hawke has are incredible, and in particular, one scene where she's heard the truth about her father at a summer internship opportunity, and he goes out and lies to her to tell her that all the lies or all the things she's heard about his infidelity are fake and lies people out to get him. And this incredible moment where Maya Hawke is like, oh, I'm so relieved, those were such nasty things. And Cooper totally delivers on the performance where it's like you see his heart breaking because she
Yes.
just said if she knew the truth she would be disgusted and would hate him. And it's like, oh my god, this scene could be the center of a totally different movie about the family life and how what all that means and how you sacrifice that to your art and so on. And they're all just kind of always humming in the background, and sometimes in the tension of the marriage they're present there. And then as Felicia dies, they have a really funny little dance moment where they just kind of hug and embrace, and it's like, oh, if this was a movie about family, that would work too. But it's like there's not
Right.
enough there to like string it all together. But shout out Maya Hawke, who continues to have incredible taste and just keeps doing really fun, great
Yeah,
parts.
absolutely. And she, in theory, has a pretty small part in the film, but she does so much with it. I think, yeah, I agree. She's a good, and the scene also, when she like meets Felicia for lunch, and Felicia tells the story about how she thought she was going on a date, but then then she
Yeah.
wasn't, right? Like, that whole scene I thought was really good too. But yeah, you're right. Like that was actually, if I were to pick the next thing I was going to name that scene, because I think it dramatically in terms of the acting and stuff, that was the best, could have been the best scene in the movie,
Mm.
because that his heart is sinking, like, because he's hoping, when he finds out about this, he's kind of thinking about it as, well, here's an opportunity for me to to really share who I really am with my daughter and to become closer to her, right? And then in a split second, it's the opposite, where it's like a huge chasm is between them now, because he knows that how she would react if she knew the truth. And so, like, I don't know. But then also, like, there's a lot of denial happening in this, I want to say.
Yeah.
Because I'm also
She's
like, is it plausible she really wouldn't know? You know what I mean?
he just brings random men into their family retreat from time to time. Yeah. Um, and I know that the actual Bernstein children were very involved in at least like getting to know Bradley Cooper and helping in the plotting of this. And I think a lot of those scenes are them trying to shape that narrative too. And I think that only makes sense that it, just like the marriage, it can be that messy and also be something really wonderful and something they remember really fondly. And so
Mhm.
again, show us a little of the messiness, but it would be nice if there was kind of an arc to it, and it
Yeah.
shows some of that. You did a really nice job while I was getting Snoopy of explaining your love of the opening. I think that opening sequence is absolutely on my list. Like, it starts with such energy. I don't need to repeat what you said, but I will throw in, I also really like when they go on essentially like a fantasy date and they end up watching the musical
Oh, the
rehearsal.
on the town.
Yeah, and then Bradley Cooper dances, and I was like, this should not be working, and it was totally working for me. I'm like, this is fun and it's endearing, and like, it just had, like you're saying, a little bit of spunk and energy there at the beginning that it was like, this is great. This feels so like cinema, baby. We love it. And then
Yep.
it just so wasn't that movie after that opening portion. And you shouted out the transition from black and white to color is really nicely done, but I find myself getting much less interested in the movie once it switches to color.
Once it goes to
Just
color. Yeah, I agree.
yeah, it's just more the script than anything. But
Yeah, I
I
noticed on
lose
a
interest pretty
rewatch that
quick.
it goes from a shot, a front on shot of Carrie Mulligan, and then it cuts, and then it flips to her back. Like,
Mm,
and the first one's in black and white, and the second one's in color. It's a really good transition, but pretty small, but really effective. But yeah, I agree that like after that, it's sort of downhill for me. The thing I'll say too, again, why I like the first act of this film so much, that dream sequence is again a callback to American musicals from that time.
mm, yeah.
I'm trying to think of what the most common example that people would know. I guess Oklahoma is like the big example of this. There's a huge ballet dream sequence. And so to me, it was both really functional for the story because the acting, like Carrie Mulligan has really good facial expressions during that whole scene. Cause she's like, yeah, this is fun. And then she kind of realizes what's happening and she's like, oh, like, okay. And then in that moment too, I was like, because I've seen the film version of On the Town. It's Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra, and I can't remember who
Mm,
the third sailor is, but um, it's really fun. And like but I saw that when I was a kid, and so watching that dance sequence, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that there was like a gay subtext to that musical,
yeah,
but now it
yeah.
seems very clear. So yeah, and I guess like we're not ones to to speak necessarily to this as a queer story, but I've definitely heard mixed reviews on that front as well. Like Dan Baer on Next
Yeah.
Best Picture, um, who is both gay and Jewish. I'm pretty sure. I think he said that many times. He was kind of like he was
Mm,
like, did I want this to be represented in this way? Does it do enough? I think was maybe his question. Like, does it engage with Leonard Bernstein's sexuality enough, or is it just kind of like burying it underneath a bunch of other things too much? And so that's an interesting question. I don't think we need to answer that question. I don't think we should answer that question, but like,
yeah, yeah.
just throwing that out there. um
It
uh
continues the trend of, we've reached a good point in representation, which is you can't just celebrate having a character who's gay in your movie. You really need to think about what it's saying and what it's doing with that. And
yeah,
I think this is a good example of, like, I didn't need this to be the tragic story of a man grappling with his bisexuality, but like, I think it should have had a little more to say
yeah.
about it in some
And there are bits
regards.
of
But
it,
you're
like
right.
that scene where he's walking in the park, right? He's walking in the park with his former lover, right?
Yeah,
And that scene is very emotional because they don't say
yeah,
anything, but you can but all you can tell what they're feeling, right? But in terms of the text of the movie, the closest we come is like periodically a character will say, well, and um it's usually Sarah Silverman as the sister who says like he can never be wholly one thing, right? And they kind
yeah,
of echo that through different aspects of his identity, right? It's both he is attracted to men and women, or has been with men and women. But then it's also, he's a conductor and a composer, right? And that's a big tension where he's being pulled in two different directions. Where like the classical musicians want him to be a conductor, but he also loves musical theater, and he's being kind of pulled in more of this populist direction. And it
Yeah.
turns out that, like, and the movie never really gets at this, but it turns out that his major contribution to American music was that he managed to sort of hybridize those two things, right? He elevated the American musical and sort of made it so that like that scores of musicals could be considered like high art and high classical music. So like, but you wouldn't know that from this movie. But then also it's like he's caught between, there's something he says at the very beginning when he meets Felicia, and he's like kind of getting to know her background of how she's like from Chile, but like she has kind of like a mixed heritage or something. And like, and then he kind of compares that to growing up as a Jew, and his dad wanted him to be like, you know what I mean? Like there's a whole story where he's like, they try to make us be one thing, and we're better because we're two things or something like that, right? I'm not getting that right, but so maybe
No,
that's what the
it's the
thesis of
scene
the
when
movie
they're
is.
outside the window and there's a beautiful
Yeah.
that's a good thesis, right? Like I love that idea. And I think particularly if you wanted to lean into one of his minoritized identities to say you're only allowed to be one thing if you're like this or in this category. And yet again, it's not there. Like it's the uncanny valley. It is almost that thesis, but it's not really there, and so we're stuck.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'd say we're ready for we've already kind of covered some rhetorical situation ground, but I'll put us in there, and then we can just sort of like put the highlights of what it is. So this is the rhetorical situation, a segment in which we look at a film through the lens of our academic experience. So all four of our regular co-hosts are writing professors. So we like to have a section of each episode dedicated to making connections to our experience as scholars and teachers. In the teaching of writing, the rhetorical situation refers to any contextual factors that influence composing and interpretation. And again, as I said, we've already touched on several things that could be in here. One is, I think, the lack of a clear thesis totally reminded me of a critique I give on student papers all the time of like, I see good things. There are motifs of good ideas here and here and here, but you are not sort of in control of your own argument enough to really have a clear thesis. I feel like that sort of sums up the conversation we just had. But what to you that we haven't talked about yet kind of pops up in the rhetorical situation?
Yeah, so there was just a big article that I've had forwarded to me by I think 3 faculty members about how there's a reading comprehension chasm coming up, a crisis. That's the word I was looking for. A crisis coming up because college students aren't able to read at the level they used to be. And there's a lot of kind of hand wringing, and it's overblown in some ways. But it really made me think about the way a modern student experiences text, and I would add film into that. And it, to me, is true, and it's true for me. I'm not putting this only on students, that the effects our smartphones and our whatevers have had on our attention span is really starting to have a strong effect on how students are engaging with information and how we're doing this. So when I think about contextual factors for this film, it has been the ongoing narrative since December, I think, is I saw this movie and I was like, this is pretty good, guys. Like, I had a good time. I don't even know that I bragged to you all, but I just threw my letterbox in, and I think it was 4 or 4.5. And I was pretty high on it. And it was because I had gone to the theater and I sat and watched it. And everything we've talked about works so much better on the big screen. Like sitting in the dark light theater with that light blocking curtain, and then the curtain comes up and the music hits and he jumps and he smacks the guy on the butt and then just like races through the theater. You're just like, cinema, baby, like we did it, like this is incredible. And it's because you're in the classic dark room with nothing but that to focus on. And I will go to my grave being dead set on never having my phone out in the theater because I just don't want to. And that's part of why I love going to the movies, is getting to put it away. I think of our 4 hosts, I'm the only one who caught it in the theater, and
That
everybody else
sounds right.
watched it on Netflix. And I think it makes a huge difference in a film like this. And I just rewatched this yesterday, and you bet your bottom dollar that I was pulling out my phone every few minutes. I was like, oh, this is the part where she coughs a lot because she has cancer. Let's just see how my Instagram post is doing. And look, we're all humans. Maybe you don't pick that moment, but you lose something not being in it. And so I hear a huge amount of talk on movie podcasts about the better sound and the better picture still in theaters, even though home theaters have made great advancements. But I most of all think this is a film that benefits hugely from the immersiveness of being in the theater and not second screening it. Um, Now, Jen, we're all friends here. Our listeners are our best friends. Be honest. When you watch this, how like locked into it were you, or were you, folding laundry or wiping noses, all the wonderful things we do as parents?
So I watched this over the holidays, and I already mentioned I watched it in sort of two sittings. One was on my phone while my kids were busy playing with my in-laws, and I was like, oh, like no one's paying attention to me. Maybe I can start watching Maestro. I really want to watch Maestro. And so that's how I kind of watched the opening like 20 or 30 minutes. And then I texted all of you being like, cinema baby, like I love this. And then PT yeah, no fault of his own, thought that I had seen the whole movie and was like, I don't know, like what, like, like, and then he felt bad because he was like, oh no, I probably colored your viewing of the rest of it, which I don't think he did.
No.
I think I would have been just as meh by the end on my own, and then I got sick, and so I watched
Mm.
the rest of it on my laptop while like half passed out in bed. So I would say I'm kind of in between. I was sort of like, I wasn't like just second screening by any means, but I also was probably not under the most ideal conditions. I rewatched it today on my train ride home, on my phone, because like I wasn't sure I was going to have internet, so I downloaded it on my phone before I left. But
Sure.
so the screen size was not my choice, but I was, I still, even then I was pretty paying attention. But again, not as
Yeah.
much as you probably were in a theater.
Well, and when I offered this in our doc, you pointed out this might be part of why Netflix struggles to win Best Picture. And I just recently was reminded in my Facebook memories, the last time I didn't see all the Best Picture nominees, I had said, Roma, baby. Roma's gonna win. It's incredible. It's such a good movie. And then I ranked all, I think it was 9 that year, maybe it was 10. And the last one on the list was Green Book, and all I wrote was, no thanks, not worth it. And of course, Green Book won that year, for people who don't know the end of that story. And to me, that was a big turning point in Netflix. It's like Netflix had everything going in its favor, and they couldn't land a nomination for that. Now, part of this is I do think outside of their like prestige, we want to win an Oscar movies, Netflix is training you to half pay attention. Um,
Mm.
as you see, like the most popular movies filter through the letterboxd, like most popular, there are all these kind of really generic rom-coms that are fine, or an action movie that the plot doesn't really make sense, but it's got two cool car chases and one actor you like. And so I do think, as much as I bemoan our modern attention and want people to appreciate movies, I do think Netflix and the other streaming services have taught us that film can be a kind of background noise, kind of just disposable experience. Tune in when you want. That's what cable TV used to be, right? Like, oh, yeah, I can wander away for half this Law and Order, and I'll still get to come back and see which of the 3 guys they interviewed in the first 5 minutes ended up being the killer. And like now that's where they're placing movies. And I do think that then to also make the play at like, we have something very important that we'd like you to give lots of awards to, it's tough. But
Right,
I
those are
mean,
contrary impulses. Yeah. This movie, actually, the critiques we just made of this movie lend themselves to the like running in the background, isn't it? Because
yeah.
it's like then you can kind of dip in and out. Like I can imagine certain scenes being like, oh, let me put the laundry down and let me stop and pay more attention, right? And so in
Yeah.
that sense, if you're approaching it with the sort of second screening or like doing multitasking Netflix approach, maybe you don't notice that there isn't a cohesive thesis to the movie, maybe, or maybe you don't care, maybe is the better way to put it, right? Like maybe it doesn't matter that there isn't a clean and clear arc to the story, and it's just these little, because we these little smatterings of different things that in isolation are compelling. So maybe they actually in some ways is the perfect Netflix movie. Netflix is so interesting because they went through a phase where they were like, we're going to release things in theaters just as if they were not streaming movies. And then they
Mm.
lost. And I feel like ever since then, they've sort of, I thought of this while you were talking, they sort of have become the Bradley Cooper of streaming services or of
Oh.
studios. They've become the Bradley Cooper of studios, where they're like, you know what? We're going to do this. And then they are trying so hard and just like Charlie Brown with the football every time, to bring it back to Snoopy. So, so yeah, it's really interesting to think about in terms of like the Netflix of it all. Netflix, really interesting. Netflix is sponsoring SAG now, but Netflix was probably one of the biggest enemies of SAG during the strike.
Yeah.
So they just are occupying a really interesting and sort of weird and dysfunctional space in the industry right now, especially with like awards stuff.
Yeah. So my off-topic comment I was going to make is I also just was talking to a friend who missed Killers of the Flower Moon in the theater and saw it's on Apple now and was like, part of the problem was I never had 3 hours to go to the theater, so I'm going to treat this like a prestige show and break it up into like 40-minute chunks. Gave up after two, and I was like, that's so antithetical to how I experienced that particular film. Like the overwhelming nature of not taking a break after 40 minutes was so integral to my emotional reaction that I needed it to feel overbearing. The bravura fire sequence where she's deep in her fever and you're seeing this hell unfold, like that was like so crazy in the theater that I can't even picture what that would look like on my television. And it just means that I think nobody's going to get that full experience. And I'm really truly not making a normies argument here, but I do wonder what the
You said it, not
future
me.
of I do wonder what the future of movies looks like if that's the experience where that most people are having, right? Oh, I tuned in. It is weird because it's a moment where people are paying still so much more attention to television, like prestige TV. And my example from the opening of the show, my wife and I, for whatever reason, needed to break American Fiction into two sittings. And because it became that much more disposable, it's like, we'll finish it when we get to it. Whereas I saw that in the theater and I was in total, like locked in and totally into it. So, I want to not neglect Bradley Cooper discourse. So here's my thesis. You bat it back or bat it down, whatever you think. I think Bradley Cooper is just too sincere at this point. It's not just the desperately wanting, but he so requires this validation that he's doing good work and he's a good actor. And particularly, he's a good director, because I still maintain if he had to pick one Oscar, I think he'd take the directing one. He is a good director. I do not fault the directing of this film really
Mm-hmm.
much at all. There's some really good material in here. And yet, I think the more he wants it, the harder it is ever going to be for him to get it. Is that the right thesis, or is that just heartbreaking?
So my follow-up question to that, and this is not necessarily disagreeing with what you just said, but like, why is it that we think he wants it so badly? And this is something I
Mm.
do with students all the time, where I'm like, you keep saying this thing over and over again, but point to the evidence. Like, point to like, what is the thing that is causing you to say that? And I don't know if I can necessarily do that. You know what I mean? Is this just a thing that has become something people say? And is it just literally because he's been nominated so many times and has never won, so we've created this narrative for him that he must want it so badly? Or is there something actually in the film or in his interviews or in something that we've seen that's tangible that we can point to be like, no, he's the kid with his hand raised way high in the class, right? Like, or that
Yeah.
he's wants it too much. That's the thing I hear all the time for critics, to be like, I wish he would just not be so desperate. looking. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, well, why are we saying that? What is he doing that's making us think that?
That great question, and a good since we are in rhetorical situation, a good pedagogical move, right? Do not just let your students accept the common wisdom, but actually make them find the roots of that. Because I think you're right. This is the internet discourse around this film. Um, I think the best answer I have is that he seems so actively to be campaigning when
Right.
he's up for these awards. And so I was trying to think of an analogous person, and this is so mean, but who came to mind was Glenn Close, right? So Glenn Close got really, really close, sorry, to an Oscar, and then followed that up by Hillbilly Elegy. And Hillbilly Elegy was rough, and it was just like, it's a book, it's popular, it's a grabby part, I'm doing it, and I'm going over the top and doing it. And all of that felt like desperately sweaty. And I think that when Bradley Cooper gets out and does interviews and explains how Steven Spielberg was going to make this, but then Steven Spielberg walked across the theater in the middle of a screening of A Star Is Born and pulled out a sword and knighted him and said, "You, sir, will be the one to make the Leonard Bernstein biopic." Um, that barely exaggerates the story, but it just feels like he is seeking the approval of everyone. Now, look, if I were a film director and Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese both signed on to be producers on this, I would
Hmm.
take that as, I'm good, I made it. And maybe he has, but it just feels like he's not just happy with the nominations. He's out there actively trying to campaign. Uh, Compared to Martin Scorsese this year, Martin Scorsese is like, Lily Gladstone is awesome. Can you please pay attention to Lily Gladstone? And don't worry about me. Like, I'm good. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
I got my part. He's talked, a little bit in particular about the writing, but I think he was the only one who could be out there for that movie for a while. So any campaigning
Right.
he did was kind of as, I'm the ambassador for that movie. Whereas it feels like every time I've heard Bradley Cooper make the rounds on these different podcasts where celebrities go to get attention, your Mark Marons, your Smartlesses, those types of shows, it's very much like, can I please prove to you that I work really hard? And I don't think anybody's doubting that. So
Yeah.
it's I'm both answering and not answering your question, like a good
Yeah,
student
no, and I
would.
think you're right. And the clearest evidence we can point to is his campaigning, is his interviewing, because I think I was just listening to A24 in 24 minutes. They're doing an awards. They've been doing a review, steadily doing a review of each Best Picture nominee. They just did their Maestro one, and I feel like they were talking about how in one of those like directors roundtables. Apparently, there's an interview where Michael Mann, director of Ferrari and Heat, like sent him a letter when he and like but then Bradley Cooper starts crying, and then Michael Mann's like, I send that to everybody. So this is a
Yep.
funny story that keeps getting told on a bunch of shows, and like I think people point to that as like he didn't need to be crying, like he's taking it too
Mhm.
seriously, kind of like, and like he needs to calm down. I feel like it's little stuff like that probably. And then I think it's also, we're thinking about the type of film that this is, even though people are, including Bradley Cooper, are like, this is not your typical biopic. We tried not to kind of zag with the biopic, right? But tons of that's not stopping anybody from being like, but you're playing a real famous person, and you got a prosthetic nose, and you got old people makeup, and you're like doing all the Oscar baity things. And I think
And
people
you're in black and
immediately are
white.
internalized. Yes, you're doing black and white and color. You're
Yeah, yeah.
doing like, yeah, there's a dance sequence, like there's, this movie has checks so many, and it's about old Hollywood, right? That's another Oscar baity
Yeah.
thing of like, uh, not less so now, but traditionally, if your movie was about making movies or about making or about Hollywood in any way, like see the artist, right? Like you're in, right? And that's again
Yep.
less true now, less of a sure thing now. So he's like, I think that's what people are assuming. They're like, well, you made this movie that does all these 5 Oscar baity things, so therefore you must be really wanting to win that Oscar. And is that too much of a logical leap? I'm not sure. Maybe, it could just be that Bradley Cooper really loves Leonard Bernstein and just really wanted to do this. I also think it's also the actor-director problem of like, because he's an actor starring in a movie that he's directing, immediately people are jumping to the conclusion that he's being like a narcissist kind of.
Yeah.
And like, you know,
I
that's
think
still
unfair, as
possible,
your
but
shrug
like,
suggests. Yeah, but that is the narrative. Sorry.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. And like, you know, and there's not only so much he can do to fight that narrative, I want to say. When I see in the interviews is like he just has that sort of, I would call it like puppy dog enthusiasm, where he's, or you said he's too sincere, right? So I would say
Yeah.
it's like, to him it's this like the puppy dog enthusiasm. I'm like, I love making movies. We're gonna make movies, right? Yeah, I love movies, right? And then
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
like, okay, calm down. Like, um,
Mm,
so yeah, maybe, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to pinpoint because I love him as an actor. I think he did an amazing job directing Star is Born. I would even say he did an amazing job directing this movie. Am I calling the Oscar fairy to swap him out for someone in Best Director? No.
no.
I don't know if you do that. Are you doing that? No.
No, he can't compete in that, and I also wouldn't put him at 6th. I think you have to put Gerwig at 6, and he's probably 7. So when you were making those comments, I started in my head a wish list. And so if Bradley, if you're listening, I think he's written in a few times that he listens to the podcast.
Yes.
Um,
All the
I
floods of
think
emails to the longtakereview@gmail.com.
yeah, it's just Bradley Cooper and his
Yeah.
burner accounts. So number 1 on that list, I think you're right, 100%. Direct something you're not starring in, and
Yeah.
that's a problem because I think these get greenlit partially on his star power, and you know he's got considerable cachet to this day. And number 2, do something not Oscar baity. And I think you didn't steal this point, but I think Sean Fennessy said on Big Picture, he's like, I want to see his like car chase movie. Cause if he can do all this that well, like he can
Hmm.
handle it. I completely agree. He's proven himself as a director. So like, show us what you can do with a couple actors, one of that when one is not you, because he got great Gaga performance, great Carrie Mulligan performance, and obviously those actresses bring a lot to the table too. But a good director, if we learned nothing from the Star Wars prequels, good actors give bad performances when the director wants them to do that. Just stray shots
Yeah, I was
at
gonna
those
say,
movies, yeah.
you lost like half of our listeners with that statement.
um, so show us what you can pull out of some really good actors and do something not Oscar baity. Like show me the Bradley Cooper blockbuster, right? Like I'm
Mm.
there for that. Like, you know, when it's even more
Like a crime
twisters.
thriller,
Oh
or
man,
like,
yeah.
right?
Oh, that would be
Wouldn't that be
fantastic.
great?
Well, Guillermo and he talking in that movie they did together, right? Like do that again. I can't remember that movie.
The
Guillermo's last movie was Noir with Bradley Cooper, right? He
oh,
ended up
Nightmare
being
Alley.
the
Yeah.
geek. Nightmare Alley, there it is. Yeah. Like that was a great performance and it was gritty and fun to see him in that, and like I think if he wants to really win these, I think he's got to change the narrative. And so
Yeah.
um show us,
And
like do something fun.
you're
Yeah.
also making me think it's because he's got two movies back to back about such similar subject matter, about like, oh, how hard is it to be an amazing artist and so talented and gifted? And I think people are immediately assuming that he's talking about himself. Which again,
Yeah.
where's the evidence? You know, it's not necessarily that, right? But people are just, it's easy to make that leap. And so yeah, I agree. Like, and what's interesting is that he seems to be apprenticing with all of these big directors. Like Clint Eastwood, I think, is the biggest one. You just mentioned Guillermo del Toro. I think he often talks about, like, every time he works with a director, he's like kind of trying to pick their brain about how to be a director.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, freeing himself from the like burden of genius narrative, like make a movie that's about like something completely different from that subject matter wise, I think would be really smart. Or just something that seems like super personal to him. You know what I mean? Like that's what I
Yeah.
would love to see, is like, because I don't feel like from the movies Bradley Cooper has made, I don't think I learned anything about Bradley Cooper as a human. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, there's no elements that I suspect are biographical, or autobiographical, I should say. But, and so what's his past lives look like? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I just gonna go back to my thesis. It's the uncanny valley, right? We do not know the actual Bradley Cooper. We think we're getting some version of him, but there's not enough there that we can actually see the human behind it. Show us the human behind it. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Okay, Bradley, that's
We ready?
Jen and I's career advice for you. And so thank you for
Free of
listening. And
charge.
I hope you didn't rage quit this podcast when I said, why not, as my short take
I know,
about the
right?
film you devoted 10 years of your life to, or however
We
long.
came out of the gate. It's only because we speak as fellow overachievers and people who take what we do too seriously that
Yeah.
we empathize. We see you. We see you, Bradley Cooper, and we support
If
you.
we learned nothing from America, it's that Bart Simpson wins elections, Lisa Simpson does not, right?
Oh,
So bring a little less Lisa Simpson energy, Bradley Cooper. It
yeah.
sucks. We're all of us Lisa Simpsons want a world where Lisa Simpson wins elections, but I'm sorry, you're gonna have to bring the Bart Simpson energy.
So we're going to end with, we already started talking about, we've been talking about Bradley Cooper and the Oscars pretty much this entire time in some ways, but we are going to do a more explicit Oscars watch. All right. So this might be a very short conversation, but I'm going to name all the categories in which this has been nominated. Best Picture, Best Actress, Best Actor, Original Screenplay, Makeup and Hairstyling, Cinematography, and Sound. Does it win any of those, Greg?
First of all, credit that the bumper feels way more appropriate here than it did in our Zone of Interest episode. So fantastic.
Very true. I mean, nothing felt right in our Zone of Interest episode, I think is the issue.
No, it's just so tough. I think it's going home empty-handed. And you made an oblique reference to this. I'm going to say it outright. The fact that Rami Malek is holding an Oscar, I assume he's just carrying it all the time, for kind of playing Freddie Mercury.
It's under the Oppenheimer clipboard.
Yeah. Just peeking out. He's got an Oscar for kind of playing Freddie Mercury. I'm sorry, but he didn't sing. That was the tragedy, I think, of the last Bradley Cooper Oscar year. And here again, just an incredible performance that just doesn't have a chance. And
it doesn't.
I think that's a shame. I think Carrie Mulligan also put in really good work, but it's just not gonna be there. There was a moment in the I don't think this was her, but I think it was the studio really started circulating clips of the real life Felicia, and that was meant to show like you're not understanding how much she transformed, because I think it is easy to write it off as she's doing Katharine Hepburn, but it's very spot on and pitch perfect for it. Here's my question to throw it back to you, because I think you agree this is going home empty-handed. Should they have waited another year? Do you think if this were coming out in the drought year of 2024, would this be a much different conversation about this, or was it always going to fall a little flat?
Well, I think, and we've talked about on the show before, how this year, for some reason, there's no clear villain. Like usually one film emerges as like, no, don't vote for that. And this is the fact that a movie that we listed a bunch of things that we liked about it. And, we love and support Bradley Cooper and, want him to win an Oscar genuinely. Despite all of that, this is the movie that's getting the most ire critically. I think means yes. I think in any other year, this might be, just the Bohemian Rhapsody comp is like really getting to me right now that you just said. Because that won so many Oscars. It won so many Oscars, Greg.
Yeah.
Rami Malek.
Yeah.
Editing. Sound, right?
What were we doing that year? Like, I remember the Elton John one came out right after that, and I was like, this is so much better than Bohemian Rhapsody. Still not like a fantastic movie, but like no love for Taron Egerton, and it's a huge thing for me that Rami Malek didn't sing. So sorry, Rami.
I know. What does Bradley Cooper have to do? The man can sing, he can dance, right? He can act, he can direct, he can wear a lot of makeup. Like yeah. What does he need to do?
Oh,
I feel bad. I really feel really bad.
think about those
He's
hours in the chair. I mean, a lot of movies have
well,
great
so
makeup this year, but yeah.
I was also going to say you mentioned Carrie Mulligan having this sort of split screen side by side with the real life Felicia. They were doing the same thing with Bradley Cooper and Leonard Bernstein, like, and especially the
Yeah.
conducting scenes, like all of his movements are like almost identical. It's kind of insane. And so like, yeah, and I think in any other year, all of those attempts at campaigning to be like, look, see, because like think about Leonardo DiCaprio winning for The Revenant. That one purely
Mm.
because people were like, do you know how he suffered for his art? Like, do you know how he like almost froze to death and like almost got eaten by a bear? And like, there was all these things, and like, and that's why that I think I'm convinced that's why he won. I mean, obviously, I don't want to litigate whether or not The Revenant was good. We can do
Mm.
that another time. But you know what I mean? Like, so I feel like all of the things he's doing everything that works for other people. So like, and I think you're right to say that if we time traveled in any other year, all of these things probably would be working and people would be like, wow, Bradley Cooper put so much of himself into this role, like, and like he was directing too, like, you know what I mean, things that people are spinning as negatives and like, he's trying too hard, I think suddenly would be positives, and it doesn't make any sense. So
uh,
yeah,
I
I don't
I
know.
so wish time travel Greg from many episodes ago could blop in right now from 2025 and weigh in. But I think we don't know what the year holds. There's always a lot that is not on our radar yet. You and PT admirably wade through on the Sundance movies, but we just don't know what's going to
Yeah,
be out.
it's
But
too
I
soon.
feel like next year we're going to be talking a lot about Dune in the technical categories. Deservedly, I hope, knock on wood. Dune hype episode coming very soon to this very feed, friends, or maybe before this one. Who knows how the time travel machine works?
No, because we're
Um,
that's true. This should be
um,
before.
okay, good. But I would be surprised if Dune has a raft of acting nominations. I
Hmm.
think it is going to be very good and it's going to be all about spectacle and just awesome. But I think if you were positioning us next spring, we could very easily be talking about, oh, Maestro is going to clean up in these upper categories because there's not a lot of competition.
Yeah,
So I don't. I mean, it's hard because Maestro was floating around for so long. I think it might have been able to be released a year earlier, even. Like I think it has been kind of in the can, quote unquote, for a while. So it would have been probably a mistake to just hold it for a year.
keep
But if
holding it.
you
Yeah.
really want to win, I think this was a. I mean, we've said it all season long. This is just a really good year of movies, which is going to make next year so painful
We
when
might be able to blame
Argyle gets in for
Netflix.
Best Actor.
Oh, John,
So
why are you doing that?
no.
Why? Stop. We didn't need to say that the name of that movie on this episode. We didn't at all. Yeah, and the thing I was trying to say a second ago, rudely interrupting you, was that this might be Netflix's fault also, because I'm trying to think of, like, Netflix actually has a pretty weak Oscar slate this year, if you think about it, right? Like
Comparatively, yeah.
Maestro's the only one that made crested into Best Picture. And Society of the Snow got a couple nominations. It could have been, and I think they maybe were hoping that was going to be their All Quiet on the Western Front for this year. But like, other than that, like, so it might have been that they were like, we don't have anything else that's going to be as strong as Maestro as an Oscars play. So they might have been pushing for it to come out this year, in
Yeah,
spite of the
that's true.
competition. But who knows? So we're just totally speculating. We don't know anything about that. The one category this does have a shot in, because it's either going, my theory is it's either going home empty handed or it's going home with one win, and that is for makeup and hairstyling. Um,
Mm.
I'm of two minds of this. I keep going back and forth because on the one hand, I believe it was me saying on our BAFTA show, it couldn't even win makeup, and Poor Things won makeup, right? Like, but apparently I was listening to Next Best Picture this morning, and they reported, because I didn't actually know this had happened, they reported that the Makeup Guild, it won some. I'm gonna get this wrong now. I should have looked this up before we hopped on. But there was like a guild that awarded that it won, like that Maestro won makeup, and beat Poor Things in for the actual makeup and hairstyling guild. So like, I think it's still in the race a little bit, and I keep hearing everyone talking about the makeup artist that worked on Maestro is kind of like one of those like legendary artists that
Mm.
like, and now I need to look up his name because I also didn't look that up.
Wait, I can't keep up. So first, it won. It was up for 3 awards at the Makeup Artist and Hairstylist Guild. It claimed the prize for period/character makeup and special effects. It
Okay.
lost to period/character hairstyling to Barbie, which
Okay.
is awesome that Barbie's a period piece in their definition, is how
Yeah.
I'm
Wait.
I'm
What?
taking that. You must have to lean into the character as a part of that. Also,
Right. Or the
just make
history of
sure.
the history of the
Oh, go
hair,
ahead.
like the hairs from different periods, like about when Barbie was
Maybe.
like from the 50s and 60s. I don't know. That's a stretch.
I was going to say the other headline I'm seeing here is that Saltburn did really well. So if
Oh
you're
wow.
looking to fill in your Greg bingo card, I just wanted to say the word Saltburn.
Oh, if I had
Yeah,
more
there it
time, I would have put together a Murder on the Dance Floor drop for you, but I didn't.
is.
And then I was like, well, I'm only going to be able to use this like 2 more times probably before no one cares. Um, so Kazuhiro is the name of the makeup artist. Now
And
I want to look
it's
that
well
up.
deserved. I think there's
Kazuhiro.
a whole discourse around the nose, but I would kind of sidestep the nose and do the age and the hair, like phenomenal work. Like you
Mm-hmm,
never,
mm-hmm.
or I shouldn't make it collective. I never questioned their age, and you saw it in their faces, and it worked really well. So,
Yeah.
well
I mean,
deserved.
I still probably would have opted to not try so hard to make Bradley Cooper look like Leonard Bernstein because I think that to
Mm,
me that was slightly distracting. And it wasn't the
yeah,
old people versus young people makeup. It was really just I guess the nose where I was just like, it did we need that? I get that it
yeah.
makes it technically look more like him, but like I would have been happy to suspend my disbelief and be like, yeah, that's Leonard Bernstein. It's not Bradley Cooper.
The
Or just
performance
like see
didn't
that.
need it, right? Like his
Yeah, exactly,
posturing and
exactly.
his mannerisms, if those had all been there without the nose, I totally would have bought it. No problem.
Yeah. So apparently Kazuhiro won for best makeup and hairstyling for The Darkest Hour in 2017
Mm.
and Bombshell in 2019. So,
Oh, I
I
forgot
mean, this
Bombshell
kind of
existed.
follows that tradition.
Yeah. I forgot Bombshell existed. And then I also, just because you're talking about traditions, usually you talk about the makeup and being tied to the lead actor, right? But in this case,
Mhm.
Cillian Murphy really, not to belittle any artist, there's an incredible amount of makeup and hairstyling that goes into a normal person, but it's not kind of a wow in that film,
Sure.
even though there's
Not
some of the same
transformative,
aging
yeah.
going on. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah, for
not
sure.
Gary
It's
Oldman
basically a
in The
bald
Darkest
cap and
Hour.
some hair.
Yeah.
Yes. Right, exactly. So I'm of 2 minds because I think this type of makeup work is what typically, I mean, it is we were just making fun of it for being Oscar baity. Like it is typically what wins a lot of the time. There isn't that clean, oh, it's tied to best actor. And then but you could say if Emma Stone's winning best actress, that maybe Poor Things wins in makeup and hairstyling to go with that.
Mm.
But that doesn't necessarily that doesn't always correlate. Like it's often a connection, but it's not a deal. It's not like a deal breaker or anything like that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. But it's one place where like it could win, and that could be if we're doing this more like if there's any beyond the Oppenheimer steamroll, if there's any kind of spread the wealth impulse, that would be a good place to give Maestro something.
Yeah. We've already well established we're in the zone of interest corner for sound, but again, if this had been a movie we all saw in theaters, I think we'd be talking a lot more about the sound. You had some
Mm-hmm.
great notes above about how it uses his music as the score in some really memorable ways, like which means it's not score. So it uses it as the soundtrack, not the score. But
Sure, yeah, but it's
it
in place of a score, is what I meant.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was making fun of myself, not you. And I think if we'd really, when the West Side Story song hit in the theater, I was like, yes, like I'm all here
Yes.
for this. And so I think if we'd all done this, heard the sound in the theater, we maybe would talk about it there, but I don't think that's going to happen. So,
Yeah. No,
um,
I agree. But that West Side Story scene cracked me up because I was like, "Oh," and then I was like, "Well, there aren't really other places this is happening," but I'm like, it's using the subtext, like it's using the context or the reference to West Side Story and the Sharks versus the Jets to be like I can't remember the guy's name, but like Felicia versus
That guy. Yeah. The
that
guy
guy.
carrying the dog food.
James. I want to say his name is James.
Yeah.
That the guy that nobody wants there except Lenny.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought that was really funny because it's like the height of the tension between their relationship, and to have it be the Sharks versus Jets,
Genius.
like evoking the Sharks versus Jets, I thought was very smart. I do think that the opening quote of the is it Beastie Boys song?
REM. I was just going to say,
Oh,
let my
sorry.
closing thought be that though that was my opening quote, I find that moment unforgivable. The fact that
Yeah.
Bradley Cooper was just like, hey, in case you thought I'm the only one who cares, remember when REM said his name in a song? And that's, I mean, I think the 3 lines I quoted are all you hear of that song. And then they shut off the car radio.
Yes.
So in the world of this movie, Leonard Bernstein is listening to the REM song because, yeah, he'd be listening to Top 40 on his car radio and then shuts it off as soon as they say his name and never acknowledges it. That's absurd.
So like either he's so narcissistic he listens to songs that mention him on purpose, or the movie's sort of breaking the rules of reality and diegetic sound. Just to get that reference in there, and neither of those are good choices. So I agree. That was really jumping the shark moment for me too.
Yeah.
All right, Bradley Cooper, we love you. We support you. We want you to win Oscars, just not for this. And
but
Greg,
make more movies. Make more movies.
But make more movies. Yes, make more movies, and stop worrying about what if you are worrying about winning Oscars, stop doing that. That's what we'd say. We don't know if you are. We want to say that people shouldn't be assuming that you are, but if you are, don't worry about it. So Greg, thank you so much for unpacking this movie and being the one to sort of step up to do it. Other people on the Long Take Review, we're not as enthusiastic to talk about this movie. So thank you for stepping up to the plate. Where can folks find you and your fine work on the internet?
People can find me on Substack, on Letterboxd, on Instagram, and on Threads. Forgot what that service was called. I'm everywhere at Ion Canon, EYEONCANON. If you are a Star Wars fan, I am in the middle of my many podcasts every week stretch by reviewing the Bad Batch episodes on the Rebel Base Card feed. So if you are watching Bad Batch and you want to hear some nerds talk about it on the internet, maybe some long take guests coming up this season. I don't actually know, but I told my co-host to contact some long take review people. So hopefully we'll hear from you all.
hints at invitations have been made, so we're hopeful.
Good.
We're hopeful we're gonna make it happen. And you can find me on Instagram and Threads at Sobchakchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI, and you can follow the show either by subscribing to my Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, and that gets you all my written reviews, plus every time a new episode of the show drops, you'll go right to your inbox. Or you can follow us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Now is the brand new, shiny new thing. And PT would want us to say that you can, if you would like to email us directly and not go through social media, you can email us at thelongtakereview@gmail.com. Did I miss anything? I guess you already plugged the Letterboxd. You can find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jinn, and the LTR pod is our tag. Thanks, Greg. We still don't know who left Snoopy in the vestibule.
I still got him. We'll post it in our stories.
All right. Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive new podcast episodes, as well as written reviews of films with Oscar buzz and new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.